Okay, so quick question. How do you define when something is countable and when something is uncountable? Some of you might say that when we can count something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can call that as countable. But when something is not possible to count, we assume that as uncountable. This is somewhat might be true, but some of you might become skeptical. Some of you might not want to truly believe this when you first heard this one. And you might actually say something like, okay, so what about rice? We can actually count like the grains of rice within a bag. And then for hair, we can actually count each strand, right? It's it has to be countable. And also with sand, if we have a very, very powerful microscope, we can just like look through it and just count each grains of sand. But why do we still assume these things as uncountable? Okay, so some of you may say like, oh, it's because it would take too long when we actually count those things in real time. So let's say a bag of rice, if we want to count how many rices are there, we will take like a long, long time, right? So that's why we assume these things as uncountable nouns too. Okay, so there comes this question, like, what about furniture or music? Why are these things uncountable nouns as well? We know that chairs and tables are countable, but when it comes to furniture, it becomes uncountable. Same with songs, right? Songs are countable, obviously, but when it comes to music again, it becomes uncountable again. So why is this? Surely there must be some kind of logical reasoning behind this grammatical rule, right? Right? Spoiler alert, there is no such kind of a rule for countable and uncountable nouns that is like always true. There is always an exception. So we can just assume a generalized pattern that is true for most of those things. But you have to you have to do keep in mind that there are always exceptions lurking around. So this is not 100% uh, like applied to every single nouns. Okay, so let's try to go deeper into what makes things uncountable. So the Purdue University Online Writing Lab has suggested that count nouns, they use count nouns as a short form for countable nouns. So count nouns refer to things that exist as separate and distinct individual units, whereas non-count nouns refer to things that cannot be counted because they are thought of as wholes that cannot be cut into parts. So what this actually means is that if you think of a word as a single individual specific unit, we can assume it as a countable noun. But if we think of the word as a collection or a group of things, right, we assume it as an uncountable noun. I know you're confused, but let me give you an example. So let's think of the word pen, right? If I say the word pen, you might immediately imagine let's say like a pen, right? So in your head, you will think of as a pen. But if I say pens, you would think like a lot of pens, right? So this actually means you are thinking of it as a single individual unit when I say that word. But when I say the word water, you do actually have an individual specific unit because water is in a flow state. It doesn't have a specific shape or condition, so you always think of it as a group, right? So we can also call it as a mass. You think of it as a mass of thing, right? So in contrast of a pen, furniture. The word furniture, when we hear the word furniture, we imagine a group of things because in furniture there are chairs, tables, and other furniturizable things included in that single word. So if we hear the word furniture, we might imagine a lot of things altogether. We do not imagine as a single specified unit anymore. So that's why this is what that rule is trying to tell us. If some word is recognizable as a single unit, it's countable. If something is not recognizable as not it's not like recognizable or something, but it's like assume as a group, right? Assume as a mass. If we assume it as a mass, we like think of it as an uncountable noun. So that is what this the university is trying to tell us. This thing also goes the same with money and bread, right? Money and bread. So to make it more like clearer in your head, let's say capital X, right? So let's assume capital X as every even number that exists. Okay, capital X is every even number, every, right? I am just stressing the word every even number that exists in the world. But small x is just any, right? Any even number that exists in the world. So what's the difference, right? The difference is that for the capital X can be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 all together at the same time. At the same time, because remember, I said every even number. But for the small x, right, the lowercase x is any even number, which means it can only either be 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 or so on. It cannot be 2 and 4 at the same time. It cannot be 2, 4, 6, 8 at the same time. It cannot be multiple words at the same time, one or the other. But for capital X, uppercase X, it is everything at the same time. So small x becomes countable and capital X is uncountable. That is what the rule is. However, some nouns can be countable or uncountable, like they can be interchangeable. So why is this? Why is this the case? This depends on how we are using that word. So if we use that word as a countable sense, it is countable. But if we're using it as an uncountable sense, it is uncountable. What does that even mean? What it means is that, let's say, for example, light. Light can be both countable and uncountable. I'll give you an example sentence, right? The disco lights are blinding my eyes. So here, notice that I use light, countable. In that sentence, we use light as a countable sense because we are trying to define the types of light that the disco emits, thus making light as a countable noun. Because disco light has multiple kinds of light: red, green, yellow, blue. But for the uncountable side, let's say, for example, light travels faster than sound. In this case, we are thinking of light as a general sense, right? So it's like a general view. Light is faster than sound. So here we're not thinking of light as a specific individual unit anymore. We're thinking it as a general thing. So that's why in this case, light becomes uncountable. Similar example can be seen with paper. So if we think of paper as a material, like paper needs to be recycled, we're thinking of paper as a material in this sentence, so it becomes an uncountable noun. Whereas if we think of the paper as an essay or a thesis, we think of it as a countable noun. So for example, I need to finish my papers tonight. So here, in this sense, it becomes countable. So to rephrase it, if we are talking about a noun as a specific piece, we think of it as a countable noun. But if we talk about it as a group or a collection or a mass of thing, we consider it as an uncountable noun. It is really hard to actually have an absolute rule with this uncountable noun. There are always exceptions popping out left and right. So we can just make a generalized pattern to actually understand. So the best thing is, if you don't know it, do not use it in your writing.